What is going on, guys? Welcome to Cinemaniac Central, the one place where you can be a crazy movie lover and just be crazy about movies. I want to thank you for joining me here today. I'm going to be giving you guys my thoughts on what I think is one of Daniel Stern's most underrated comedies, Bushwhacked, directed by Greg Beeman and stars Daniel Stern, John Polito, Brad Sullivan, Anthony Held, and Ann Dowd, which you can see in the upcoming Exorcist Believer film that's coming out in October. So Daniel Stern stars as Max Grebelski, a bumbling delivery boy who finds himself the pawn in this money laundering scheme by this corrupt businessman who is framing him for murder in order to collect on some big insurance money. So Max finds himself on the run from the police and is now being mistaken for a scout leader and is basically forced to take a group of kids on an overnight hike into the woods. I think that Bushwhacked, is one of his most underrated movies, as I said before. I remember when this movie came out back in the mid '90s. I remember, I think that we rented it. I was like 8 years old when this came out, or going on 8. And I remember watching it on HBO when it premiered on HBO, like in the late '95, early '96, and I absolutely loved this movie as a kid. So I didn't care if there was anything wrong with it, But as a kid, you don't give a shit. But as an adult, yeah, you kind of notice the issues, and there are some issues that I have with it that are pretty glaring, especially after a rewatch. I watched it the other day. But getting the things that I love about the movie, one, I think Daniel Stern is funny in it. I think he kind of transitions that same kind of character from the Home Alone movies into this as this bumbling delivery guy, who's kind of gets himself caught the wrong place at the wrong time, kind of scenario. And these bad guys kind of picked him because they figure he's a loser. Nobody's going to care. So, yeah, but nobody's going to care. So, yeah. I think Brad Sullivan, is really good in this as the actual scout leader that Max has kind of waylays toward the beginning of the movie there and steals his car. And that's how he gets mistaken for the scout leader, which I will get into my negative, which kind of falls into my negatives, and I'll get into that in a second. The set pieces here is pretty good. This is set in the woods. I think most of it looks pretty realistic. There are a few green screen spots that I spotted, especially one where Max and I think Gordy, they're talking in the third act, right outside the cave, just before they get ready to climb the mountain, to go to Devil's Peak. And so there's a little notice a green screen right there, which I'm sure there is in other spots, but yeah. But other than that, it's a beautiful setting, And that's pretty much where my positives end, unfortunately. But with my negatives, and there's not a whole lot of them, there are some glaring issues. One of my biggest issues is these kids. They're not the brightest, and that's what gets me. Is that there's at least one or two of them that kind of, especially Barnhill, I think is the one who claims to have a father that's so great. He's done all these different things, been on these different adventures, As a collective, these kids aren't really smart. They should have been able to tell right then if this guy is not a real scout leader. So they might not have been able to tell that he was a criminal, but he's no scout leader, especially when the shoes that he's wearing ain't no damn hiking shoes. Was in the third act when they're climbing the mountain to get to the cabin where the bad guys are where they are to retrieve all the money and everything. There's a cabin it's called Devil's Peak. That's the top of the mountain. Whatever. They're climbing the mountain to get there, but at the same time, the same delivery van, delivery company that he works for, is delivering this money. Why didn't they just take the road from that? They had a map that would have led them to a road that would take them to the cabin. Why didn't they just take the road to go to the cabin instead of having to go through all that trouble to climb the mountain and get there? It don't make any sense to me. And also, and there are some unrealistic situations, whenever Um, Gordy, they're at the cabin on the porch, and then Gordy, he runs and trips over one of the deck boards, and he's just kind of gets launched into the air, go over the railing and everything, and just that wouldn't really happen. I don't think he's going to be able to launch himself in the air like that unless he did it on purpose. And then, of course, when they're hanging on the ledge there, and there's no way that he could be able to hang on to that branch, especially with Max stepping on the end of it there, and just he wouldn't have been able to hold on to that rock, and then it's weird, but it's really cool to see Max transition from this bumbling delivery guy to this hero, which leads to a pretty funny award ceremony at the very end there when he gets that badge of Ranger Scout Leader, and he's just like, "Oh, thank you, thank you." And then it gets funnier whenever he finds out that he can take the kids on another overnight in Yosemite, but he has to take a whole bunch of kids, and all these kids just come running at him and everything. And he's like, "Ah!" It's hilarious. But yeah, this is a movie. I mean, it's really funny. It has its glaring issues, but I think it's one that's really underappreciated and really should be viewed a lot more. It's been almost 30 years, and I think it really should be checked out, especially if you're a Daniel Stern fan. I think it's really funny. But yeah, but that's just my opinion on Bushwhacked. Like I said, I love this movie ever since I was a kid, and also I love the score. I love the music. It has that music that you only ever hear in this movie and nowhere else. And just I don't know, I watched this movie so many times. Every time I hear this score, I just love it. And I love that it parodies two movies. It parodies Saturday Night Fever at the very beginning, where he's walking down the street and they have Staying Alive playing over it. And then it basically parodies The Fugitive, where they basically, got this government agent and the cops are going after him and everything. So that's a big influence there. But yeah, I love this movie. It's funny, it has its flaws, but if you're a Daniel Stern fan, I highly recommend it. It's definitely one of his most underrated comedies, along with Celtic Pride with Dan Aykroyd and Damon Wayans, which that's one I never really could get much into. I've watched it at maybe 3 or 4 times, but definitely not as much as I've seen Bushwhacked. Absolutely love this movie. Go check it out if you haven't already. That's just my opinion on Bushwhacked. But if you like what you see here, hit the subscribe button. It really helped me out a lot. I love you guys. You guys are the best. And remember, love watching movies, but more importantly, love yourself. I'll catch you on the flip side.